I honestly don't know how you do that in two languages as beautifully and eloquently as you do, but it's just so inspiring. Thank you so much. And I also just want to say a big thank you to an individual who has not really been recognized publicly, but Manuel Bagoro. Since you were cited, please come down. Many of you have met Manuel. He's certainly my right hand and a huge part of the Culture Summit Abu Dhabi team and has helped in the curation of all of these amazing performances. So if I may, please, let's give Manuel a big round of applause. Thank
you. Okay, that was fantastic. And I'm glad you got the piece of cake. As soon as I saw it there, I felt you needed to have it, because it was going fast. In any event, one of the things that I had said was we had a great panel coming up that was going to pick up on some of the themes of the morning. And that panel is on the changing role of women in the evolving culture of culture. And on the panel, we have Hannah Godefa. Do we have Hannah Godefa? We may have Hannah Godefa because she's en route from an airport. We have Keri Putnam, who's the executive director of the Sundance Institute. We have Elke Ritt, who is the head of arts for the British Council of Germany. We have Jan Gieling, who is a writer, and the moderator is Nell Scovell, who is a screenwriter. She's the co-author of Lean In, and she has a new book out on what it's like to make it as a comedy writer in Hollywood. And all of you are going to get that book when you get home, because we're going to send it to all of you. So, yeah, that's the moderator's seat. I mean, give her a break, okay? Anyway, let me turn it over to you now.
Great, thank you. And it's been wonderful to see all the diversity in the panels so far. So we all recognize that there are biological and physical differences between men and women. In a 10,000-meter race, the fastest man will beat the fastest woman. So I want to begin by asking each panelist, yes or no, do you believe there's a difference in the creative capabilities of men and women?
No.
I haven't obsessed now.
No.
All right, so now let me ask the audience. Could you please raise your hand if you think men and women are equally capable creatively? All right, and and now please the hands of people who think men are more capable than women. Don't be scared. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. All right, so most of us So most of us acknowledge the equality of talent, and yet only 5% of the art in the permanent collection of museums was created by women, and only 4% of the top 100 grossing movies in the past 10 years were made by women. So I don't believe we live in a meritocracy. I think there are gender-specific obstacles that explain this. So again, I'd like to go around the panel, and can everyone name, we'll start with you, one reason why you think we're still having this discussion in 2018?
I don't know, because I'm writer. I work alone all the time, and more than 10 directors, mostly men, bought my original stories and made them into movies. So I don't. Your number really shocked me the first time. Only 5%, and it never. And I haven't been aware of it.
All right, Elke, why do you think this?
I don't think it's a gender-specific thing. It's more to do with the role that is imposed on gender, that we still have to discuss it, because although we have a human right to be different, there's still we don't still yet live it, there's still a mental block to understand the differences and to understand that there's creativity at all ends. So I think there's a lot to discuss actually to get over this mental block.
Keri?
Well, I think there's two things that come to mind, top of mind. I think first, culturally, we've been socialized to believe that stories by men are universal and stories by women are merely about women. And I think that's a huge impediment in terms of advancing women storytellers, at least in film, which is the area in which I work. A second big one is access to financing, which I think came up on one of the earlier panels. When money comes into the equation, especially in film or media, it tends to be when women move out of the equation.
I agree, and I also feel there's so much, the gatekeepers are so often male and want to see stories that reflect their perspective. And in fact, in the art museum world, the Louvre, the British Museum, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art have never had a female director. So the question becomes, how do we get gender equality when women are starting at such an unfair advantage? So I know the Sundance Institute is working hard to combat bias, and maybe you could tell us which methods are working best.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long game for us. First of all, maybe just to say a little bit about what we do, because I think a lot of people might know Sundance because of the film festival, which is a well-known event that we run for independent film from around the world. But Sundance also supports artists with residencies and grants and programs at earlier stages. And so the work that we do to advance storytellers starts at the very beginnings of their careers often, and of their individual work. So what we discovered, I came to work at Sundance 8 years ago, and I was really looking forward to being in the independent space because I felt that there would be more opportunities. It exists really as an alternative to the mainstream commercial cinema and media culture, and I was really excited for the opportunity to amplify diverse voices.
Yeah.
And what we found was 50% of the artists in our early stage programs, in our labs, in our developmental program, were women. But by the time we got to the Sundance Film Festival, the submissions for scripted films were down to 18%. And even for documentaries where access is easier, they were still only at 32%. So we were really curious, what happened? Where were women falling out of that pipeline? So the way we approached it is we did research, and we found out that we worked with USC, and we surveyed our whole community. Yeah. And
no, I'll let you finish, but the research is so important because you can't change what you don't measure.
Well, exactly.
So,
and I think people didn't, what we found first of all was people felt that it wasn't really an issue. People didn't understand that it was a problem. People didn't understand, in the field as a whole, people thought it was getting better. What our research showed is it wasn't just 10 years, it's actually been 30 years that nothing has changed in the American media. And I think this is true, maybe you could speak to this, I think this is true in media all over the world. We've all been connected on this, yes. But what we discovered, and I'll just cut to the results of it, because but access to financing, the male-dominated networks of decision makers, and actually some issues, and this is a really tough one to discuss, but some issues around women's own comfortability talking about money, talking about being in that, how they were perceived as leaders, how they perceived themselves as leaders, often in the role of director especially, how gendered that was. And so we've developed at Sundance several programs, which I can go into later if we want to, but interventions around all of those things. And we've seen our numbers at the festival go up. Over the last couple of years, we've been in between 40 and 50% women directors at the festival, which has been a great result. So,
and is that something you're working on?
Yes, I mean, we've been the British Council, that is worldwide, an organization which works in over 100 countries. It's working to achieve trust and understanding between people in particular. It's a British organization, an official cultural relations organization. And we had the benefit of having a wonderful woman as a chair for quite a while in 1989 and to 2004, Baroness Helena Kennedy, who made an enormous difference as a chair. But she's been our only female chair, and we've never had a female chief executive. During Helena Kennedy's time, lots of things changed. There was a close look at the gender pay gap. There was a look at the recruitment system. Lots of changes were introduced. But at the top level, there has not been a radical change. There's no, maybe a pro quota is necessary to achieve this, because there's still a pay gap of 10%. We just read that in the paper last week for the British Council. It's not as bad as for some British auction houses, but it's worse than for the Arts Council of England.
Right.
But there's a lot to be done, and I mean,
do you know there are studies that show if there's a group with 20% women, the men in that group will say it's equal. There's equality. And if there are 40% women, men will say there are more women than men.
it's perception.
It's
yes,
really,
yeah.
you know, so I think it's so deep-seated, this bias. So you've written 10 screenplays that have been produced, is that?
More than
More.
that.
And what, do you tell mainly female narratives?
No,
No?
no. All my concerns are about our nation's memory of what the Chinese experienced during the last several digits, and what we think about the ideology we had been holding as our ideal. So all these big issues, maybe some of the Chinese male writers don't even deal with. So I always deal with big issues, and if you didn't, maybe in the museum, I don't know. I noticed one thing is for a writer, for literature in China, the most critics are men.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like they are holding a standard, and we try to fit their standards. And if they don't categorize your works, or they don't make some kind of theory about your works, you're not even recognized.
Yeah.
So this is I feel I'm too proud to go to them. I say, come on, take a look at my work. No way.
Well, the film critics are predominantly men.
And I think women are thinner skinned. They don't.
I disagree.
The male writers in China say, "Hey, buddy, take a look at my work." We don't do that. I don't know other female writers would do that, but I never ever do that. I don't think
That's that
if you want to notice my work, you will, and if I sell so many copies, you will have to. So that's my way of doing.
Yeah.
Okay, we finally have a female Doctor Who. And who here in the group would like to see a female James Bond? Raise your hand. Do you think that sort of gender flipping helps?
I think it adds a very valuable perspective, and also gender is about the role we are playing. It's not just physical specifics. It's how we are trained, how we behave, how we dress, and so on. I'm terribly influenced at the moment by a book by Grayson Perry, a transvestite visual artist, Turner Prize winner. Grayson Perry, you haven't heard of him? He's written a book in 2016 called The Descent of Man. and really trying to distinguish between gender and the role gender has to play, because we are trained into certain roles as women and as men. I think we need a greater awareness that we are playing something, that we are players on a stage, that we are having roles, and all of us really. And I think it will merge because we don't like these roles which are too dictatorial, which are too, I mean, the dichotomy of terms has been used by all of us already, thin-skinned, I mean, men like war, and women like peace, and
Right.
all these
Yeah.
very stupid stereotypes in a way,
That's right.
because there is a variety of approaches to these things, and I think we need to be aware of the role we are playing in a certain gender, as a woman and as a man.
I would just add to that, I sort of take issue with the idea that a woman has to tell a woman's story as well. I
Right.
think a woman can tell any story, as men have told many stories over the years, and you know, I think the idea of being the storyteller is something that frames so much about the way we see the world, and so, you know, I just
Right. Well, Catherine Bigelow, of
Yeah,
course, won an
yeah,
Oscar for
yeah,
The Hurt
yeah.
Locker, which has no speaking
yeah.
female parts. Although you could also argue that she was trying to appeal to the critics,
Right, right.
right? Is there any story that you would like to tell that you feel like the male directors wouldn't understand?
Well, I wrote, Zhang Yimou, the director Zhang Yimou, made 2 movies based on my novels. Okay, one is the novel is based on my grandfather and step-grandfather. I combined these 2 grandfathers together, so it's a long saga of one Chinese intellectual's life, what he experienced in the course of pursuing freedom. You know, so he was put in jail for 29 years as a political criminal, and he was released and went to the back to his family. And it's like
So this was more of a
Yeah,
historical
yeah, so-
sweep, but it was from a man's perspective.
right. But
Yeah.
I wrote mostly women, my
Yeah.
characters, but the women, as the observer of this world supposedly made by a man, and there's a young peasant wife. He always looks, you know, he lives in this kind of cave house.
Yeah.
So it's lower than the ground level. So the seam between the doors,
Yeah.
gates, and steps, it's always then she always looks out, and many men's feet running this way, that way, you know, in different boats.
So it's
different
literally her perspective.
Yes. So
Okay.
it's the history in her eyes are just men, you know, beating this group of men beating that, and it's so this perspective is. Then he got a even higher perspective than all these men's world. Today you're enemies, tomorrow you're friends. You know, in her eyes,
Yeah.
you know, all the same. You know, yeah.
All right, so what if all art were anonymous? Do you think that would change the balance? I mean, as much as it could be performers, it's hard.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So we all know about the study of the orchestra, and
So-
what?
It'd certainly be surprising, yes.
Yeah.
It's-
Don't you
it would
think
be-
that would? And have you ever thought of writing under a pseudonym, under a male pseudonym?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I've
most
done.
women have.
You've done that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you could change one thing today so that women would have a greater voice in the arts, what would it be? Okay.
I would probably want to ask to get older women of more experience, like Phillida Barlow, for example. The Venice Biennale was mentioned this morning. The British Pavilion showed Phillida Barlow, a woman of a mother of 5, a sculptor in her own right, who for many years, 40 years, didn't feature, only featured in the life of the young British artists like Rachel White-Reid and others. Suddenly she got a platform. She had a really big exhibition in Aachen in Germany, and then later at the Venice Biennale, really taking over a whole pavilion, and in an enormous way. I would want to give women with that experience who've been quite quiet but very influential in teaching a generation of artists a greater voice. I think there are a number of women in the world whom we haven't heard properly.
Well, I agree. I describe it that it's not a pipeline problem, it's a broken doorbell problem. And there are all these talented people on the doorstep ringing the door, but no one's opening it. So what's the one thing you would change for all women to have amplify their voices?
I don't know. I don't know what to do. You know, for men, they are easily see each other as mate, you know, in a club, you know. But we somehow we don't have that sense of a club, and we do have our disadvantages that after we got married, we have a family to raise, and then we have to care about everybody's health. You know,
So if men took more
like me,
care of
I
the
have to
children, that would make
cook
a difference.
for the family, right?
Right. So let's say men do more
Yes, let
housework
them
and
care.
child
Yes.
care. Great. One thing you could change today, wave that
I
wand.
already see it happening, I think, and I want to talk about something positive. I think, to your point, the idea of women coming together and networking and building community with other women and not waiting for gatekeepers to tell them, to give them permission to do what they want to do. It sort of reminds me of what Hope said on the stage the other day, just do it. And I think in the States we have Ava DuVernay, who's a filmmaker in the US, has this wonderful, she's a Sundance alum, she's on our board, and she's a real inspiration to me, but she has a wonderful organization called Array, which is a community of storytellers who've come together to make, support, and distribute their own work. And they just amplify one another. And what they're doing is that there's proving that there's a market out there for what they want to make. There's another organization called Femme Fatales, which now has chapters, I think, in 40 cities. Women directors popping up and supporting one another, which is amazing. There's a bug on me.
Well, ooh. There's 5 on this
gross.
panel.
So I think, and I'm sure, I mean, I'd love to hear examples about that from other countries, because I'm sure they exist. And as we travel around, you know, I feel like networking those communities that exist in different pockets around the world would be amazing, because the more, I am speaking very specifically about film and media, but I think this applies to theater, it certainly applies to other forms of storytelling arts. I think the more we can sort of prove that there's the audience out there, and we don't need to wait for people to give us permission to do that in this environment.
So Frances McDormand wins the Oscar this year and ends her speech with 2 words, inclusion writer.
Yep.
Is this something you're supportive of?
Absolutely, and Stacy Smith, who's the researcher who came up with that idea of the inclusion writer, was the one who did our research at Sundance in 2012. I am supportive of it. I don't think it's the broad answer. I think it's a great solution to diversifying who you see on the screen.
The inclusion writer is a contract that the production company makes that sets goals for inclusion, not just for women, but for people of color, people with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ community. And if they don't hit those goals, there's a penalty. So it goes past lip service. It says, I love it because it moves awareness to action. So Elke, are you hopeful for women in the coming 20 years?
I'm very hopeful for women, because I endorse Keri's view on that there's a lot happening. First, younger women get lots more opportunities than in the past. I mean, there are lots of programs, the British Council, other organizations are running for young women to get them involved. It's just, I mean, whether I'm hopeful for them. I see that they are cracking barriers. For example, in Berlin we have a British black writer, Sharon de Dua-Otu, who won the most important German language literature prize. This is really, I mean, women and young women still have to meet the wow factor. Or like the spoken word performer we just heard, a power woman with a lot of wow factor. I would hope that this isn't always necessary. I think I would like to mainstream participation for women. I mean, gender mainstreaming is still quite a big job, I think.
Galen, you spoke of women supporting other women. Are there other female writers that you could spotlight here that you think should get more attention in China?
There were young critics, are coming into Chinese literature field. They're graduates of PhD students, and half of them are women. And so this is our for Chinese female writers' hope. Yeah, they pay closer attention to female writers' works.
Right, and it was wonderful last night. David was talking about how the UAE has the predominant number of graduate students are women, and that the cabinet has a lot of women, and it seems like my country could learn something from the UAE, and I hope that that they support the arts as well. So, what narratives are we? Do you want to take questions, David, or?
You're the boss.
Yeah, let's do some questions.
Okay. Point me at okay, there's a question. I'm not throwing this over all these people. It'll inevitably result in a lawsuit. How about through here? Is that okay? There you go. It's very soft.
Great. Hi, thank you. My name is Mina Salami. I'm the author of a feminist blog called Ms. Afropolitan. Thanks for the great discussion. I wondered, the cultural industry has just been hit by a big revolution of sorts with the Me Too movement, which was founded by Tarana Burke and popularized by Alyssa Milano. And I think it's quite amazing how, I think it was in October that it went viral, and we're now in April, and so much has shifted. And so as a writer, I follow the publishing industry, and a lot is shifting. There are new books coming out about feminism and about women's rights and sexual harassment and so on, and it's really changing the mood in the industry. So my question is if you are noticing similar revolutionary change and how you feel that is impacting the industries in which you work.
Definitely noticing a lot of change in the U.S. media industry. I mean, obviously we've had some extremely high-profile examples of men who've rightfully gone down on that issue, and I think what's resulted is just an industry-wide shift in terms of the awareness of how safety and how people are treated in the workplace. I don't think that necessarily means that these issues have gone away. I just think that there's much more awareness about it now. I haven't yet seen it into the content as much. I think maybe the life cycle of film and television is a little bit longer. So that's
well. It's another reason why leadership from women is so important, because they say that there's more harassment and abuse in hierarchies, and most of Hollywood runs as a hierarchy, and if you have a woman at the top, there's less harassment, there are better work-life policies, and increased profitability. So it's not just like the fair thing to do, but it's actually the smart thing to do.
We got one over here, and then we'll go over there, and then I'll go around. We'll go. What is that? Clockwise? Go that way.
Hi, I'm Josette. I'm the executive director and founder of Gray Area Foundation for the Arts in San Francisco, California. We support the intersection of art and technology in the Bay Area and around the world. And anyway, I was curious about this day and wondering where we would go with new media. And I've been following, in the Bay Area at least, we're in this sort of bubble with technology and new media, but also with gender and identity and queer issues and LGBTQ issues. And so I've noticed a lot in the younger generation that there's this, this like a step away from gender altogether, and this use of pronouns and they, them, their. Especially in San Francisco, you can get into big trouble by even calling someone a female or her or him or. So I wonder, just in terms of where we're going in the future and some of the power, I think, in terms of women and what we've been able to do in pre-Christian cultures was just that we gave birth and we were originally drummers, and there's this book called.
I'm sorry, what's your question?
I'm going into my question. So what I was going to ask is, when we're in a post-gender society, what is the role of a woman when humans are being manufactured?
Wow, that's a really big one.
Who wants to take that? The Screenwriter, that's a good movie. They're manufacturing women.
I mean, I do think it's important that and we haven't talked as explicitly about LGBTQ. We haven't talked specifically about women of color, for which I think this is a much more significant issue in terms of the disparity of representation, certainly in media. So I just want to recognize when you talk about the issues of intersectionality that are coming about with the younger generation, that we haven't, I think, hit on that enough just now in this conversation. So. But I can't at all answer your question.
Well, I will say,
happened.
before I was only half joking about making all art anonymous, because I actually do think we would get more interesting art from a wider group of people. If there's that Yeats poem of how do you know the dancer from the dance, but if we could separate those two, I think it would actually be an explosion of creativity.
There's a question up here.
My name is Benon Kigozi from Uganda. I'm the immediate past president of the Pan-African Society for Musical Arts Education. Mine is both informative, but at the end it's a question. In my role, I've been visiting a lot of cultures across the continent of Africa. And when you go to these cultures, you find that the traditional culture has not done much to help the enhancement of the emancipation of women. You find, for example, they'll tell you that women are not supposed to play the drums, but they will dance, even though they are capable. Then men can play the drums and also dance. Now, the young girls grow up thinking that we cannot do this. It affects them. And I'm wondering whether, without really defying the cultures, whether there is a way we can modernize and also see whether that can help to bridge the gap where we are. I don't know whether that is possible, but that's what I found out. Thank you.
Great question. Maybe to hear, I'd love to hear, I don't feel like I can address that question. Does anyone, I think that idea though, but that idea of being limited in what you believe about yourself based on what your culture tells you, I think that's the same thing that we were seeing in the research we were doing in the United States. So I think it's a very prevalent problem across cultures, and something that we can all connect on. And but I don't know what the intervention to that is beyond awareness and, like I said, collective action, getting communities together. The way we just heard about the drumming in Rwanda, which is amazing, just showing that it can be done, just doing it.
And it is why breaking the glass ceiling is so significant. There's this old saying, you've got to see it to be it. So when one woman bursts through and plays the drums, it influences so many more who see that it's possible.
Okay, yes, next question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Netta Chigwendera. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm from Zimbabwe. And I don't know if I've got the ability to articulate what I have to express, whether it's a question or a comment. But it's something to do with the imposition of an idea that women are equal to men and that we have to have the same aspirations in the workplace, in the workforce. And also my personal desire for, within my career, to have some anonymity and some invisibility so that I can raise my family, so that no one's really talked about how, someone talked about a disadvantage of us having to feed our children. That's an advantage to me. It makes our community cohesive. So this idea that we have to all be in the workforce, and if we're not, then it's unequal and it's all a problem, I strongly dispute, and I feel it puts me under pressure to do things that I don't even want to compete that aggressively in the professional world. I enjoy the fact that I can, be with my family. It enriches me in so many other ways that make me a better artist. And I agree with what you said. I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is from the British Council.
Elke.
That at the point when we get past 40, and we've built up all of this experience, then maybe that's our time to shine when we've brought up our children and all of those things. But I just wanted to put that out there, and I don't think it's as big a problem. Of course, there are lots of problems in the entertainment industry, in the art world, that are created by this discrepancy of power between men and women. But some of the things that we think are problems, I don't really think it's a problem. I think it's our advantage, our strength, our role. There is a difference that I have in my setting, in the context where I am. I have to be a woman, and I enjoy that, and that's my blessing. So I just wanted to present that, and yeah.
I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jimmy. To consolidate on what you were saying, and also whether I'm capable of articulating what I would like to share, I'm not sure, but I'm going to try. I think it's far simpler. Forgive me. Time magazine the other day said 97% of all gun crimes performed in America are by men. You came up with a statistic about all art in the Louvre, in the Guggenheim. What was it? 97% is male. I spend a large proportion of my life, maybe 2/3 of my life, in very remote, hidden communities. They're not too dissimilar to the way we live, insofar as it's the women who run the communities, it's the women who have the breadth, it's the women who consolidate, it's the women who cherish the culture and the family. The men are running around making the noise, the men are running around perhaps making the art, the men are running around perhaps shooting each other. Because they're narcissistic, they're selfish, they're indulgent, they're determined, and they're very narrow-minded in their breadth of life. As opposed to a woman doesn't necessarily, you were talking about knocking on doors. They don't need to do that because they look upon wealth as far wider and broader. And I don't see it as an issue. I see you as far wealthier, far richer, far deeper in your connection than the majority of men. So I don't quite understand what the issue is.
I guess if I could just speak to that from the, first of all, I would love to hear from, I forgot your first name, from Zimbabwe, sorry. I'd love to hear what you do feel the main issue is, because when I sit in my role, we represent, a bunch of independent artists, and what we hear from our community of artists is they desperately want advocacy to be able to access opportunities to tell their stories. They can't access, this is women, this is people of color, these are people who in our culture are underrepresented and have chosen to work in the space where they need to have resources in order to be able to practice their art. So that's the context in which I've been speaking, yeah. and I understand that that's not the same context as other practitioners in other ways. So my specific context is I'm representing, in my role as an executive director of a nonprofit, a bunch of artists who are saying we need help finding access and opportunities. So coming up with networks of financing, coming up with ways of building community among those artists, coming up with ways of amplifying their voices and proving that they don't have to wait for someone to give them permission to be able to tell their stories, express themselves. And I think as we begin to shape new media, it's doubly important when we think about, I'm just looking at you, talking about VR and AR. We have an opportunity here to shape new media in a far more equal way. So I think it is important to raise these issues. I think it's important to the artists. I think it's important to all of us that the stories that are so ubiquitous in our culture represent a wider range of voices. I just truly believe that. And I understand that that's not the same as what an individual woman wants to do with her life as a mother, with her career, with her, with the way she wants to be in the world. And I understand that completely, but I did just want to provide that context for my narrative.
Yeah.
And I think part of the point
of conversation, yeah.
Right, but part of the point of having this conversation is it cannot be healthy for the culture of the world if 95% of the art comes from just one part of the population, and whether regardless of the film. Now, what individuals choose, how they choose to live their life, it's another issue. There's a bunch of hands here, and we've run out of time.
I'd just like to comment on one thing, and the other thing which cannot be healthy is that we don't hear men's voices on this issue, and it's wonderful that they are here. And I wanted to say to the first question we had, the Me Too debate has reached Europe as well, and there are cases, of course, but the men are silent, and if they speak up, they are slaughtered in the press. So we need to change that situation.
Yes.
And by the way, in my own personal experience, it requires proactive action.
Yes.
I mean, I live in a world where people are on lots of panels, and most of the panels are what they call manels, because there are no women on the panels. And beyond the ones that I do, I made a decision that I will not appear on panels unless there are women on the panels.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't make an active decision like that, it doesn't change. If you don't say it has to happen, it doesn't change, and it really does require action. I know you want to make some...
No, I'm fine, thank you.
I want to say something.
Okay, I'm going to give you a chance.
Oh, yes, because I think I was mistaken by saying disadvantages. Okay, I enjoy being a mother and a woman. You see the way I dress, you see how much I enjoy being a woman, right? So, but it's not the issue. The issue is this a fair game? We're talking about the creativity, so we don't doubt that we are inferior to men's in terms of creativity. And our products of our creativity put in the market, the fair market, are we valued the same? So this is what we are fighting for, and we're trying to correct.
Yeah.
This is a giant discussion. And it is one that should not be contained in a panel, obviously, and it has to infuse not just our discussions here, but our lives. All I can say, there are lots of hands that are up here, and a lot of people with a lot of urgency and strength of feeling about this, and I hope you will get to express the views in the rest of the event, or at lunch, or to one another. But I also, one of the ideas behind Culture Summit was tied to the idea that Keri framed earlier, which is if you can bring together people from lots of different parts of the world, and their networks and their partnerships and their shared interests can intersect, then you can have a much broader impact. And so, I want to ask all of you to join me in asking, in appreciation for each of these people to come out of their network, share their views, connect with yours, and hopefully something will grow out of it, because this is also an unexpected collaboration where lots of people with power and ideas and culture can come together and drive the discussion forward on an issue as important as this. Please join me in thanking everybody on the panel.